So, good morning everyone. Welcome to the Net Zero update session. I'm Stuart Bruff from the OPSS local delivery team, and I lead on Net Zero with the regulator colleagues that we have. The session today is really just an update on the work that we've done, some of the learning I've taken over the last 12 months, and really it's to help shape your thinking for options for the next year, highlighting some of the tools available and what work others are doing. So what is net zero? Just to put simply, net zero is the balance between greenhouse gas produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere. And the way we reach net zero is we take away the same amount that we put in. You will hear terms like net zero carbon and sort of other green terms, but net zero is around CO2 as a focused element. Excuse me. So what we're going to be covering today is how regulators fit into this picture. What is the role of regulators? Some resources that are out there for you and for businesses. Signposting opportunities, so when you do engage with businesses and have those conversations, where you can signpost them to for further support, and a couple of examples of actually what's happening, either through the projects we're doing or the work of other colleagues. So what is the role for regulators? One of the key elements is that regulators are the boots on the ground in terms of business engagement. So that opportunity to influence them, have some educated conversations and help make this the foundation of a lot of the business engagement we do. Because net zero isn't going to go away. It's very clearly a government priority. And I'm sure many of the local authorities that you work with will have declared a climate emergency. There's increasing amount of local authority enforced regulation that has an impact. So, for example, energy efficiency on products, energy efficiency standards for buildings, and just general legislation around false and misleading claims. So the consumer protection from unfair trading regulations for trading standards departments, things like claiming something is recycled, claiming something is biodegradable or sustainable. All of those are claims which can be false or misleading and in turn commit offences under those legislation. Visible behaviours for the public and your authority. As a regulator, you are a representative for your local authority. And so modelling the behaviours that we want to see, having the conversations and just sharing examples of what works. All of those are great opportunities for business engagement for those that are interested, but also to be a model for the behaviour that your authority would like the public to follow and the business community. And finally, the ability to start the conversations and signpost businesses. We do have regular engagement with businesses, either through inspections or the networks that we're involved in. And all of that is an opportunity to ask people about the work they're doing in this area, offer or signpost them support to where they can find more information. Excuse me. So, what do regulators need in order to do that? So, firstly, I think they need an understanding of the basics of climate change. If you're going to have an educated conversation with a business, you need to at least understand the issues yourselves. The awareness of the resources that are available and signposting those two, obviously. Knowledge of those regulations that you enforce with the green impact. A little gavel there, which the nerd in me knows doesn't appear in any British courtroom, but as soon as you start talking about law or regulation, the gavel appears as if we're auctioneers. And finally, examples of what works in practice. What are other people doing? What are businesses doing? When you go into a certain business premises, if you've got some examples either directly or through colleagues, of what other businesses in a similar area are doing, you can have those conversations. Have they thought about trying an energy audit? Have they thought about their energy suppliers? Have they thought about their light bulbs? All of that foundational knowledge, I think, is really essential to regulators, because it allows you to have that conversation. It's not an additional burden as part of your inspection, but it's something you can actually talk and offer to the business. As part of that training, the Carbon Literacy Trust is something that we're looking at as the OPSF local delivery team. This is a very much foundational knowledge on what climate change is and the terms on carbon literacy. They do have generic courses. There is one for local authorities, but it is at the moment focused on leadership, decision makers and procurement officers. What we're doing is funding 4 officers to go through that e-learning part of the training in order to give us the information on whether this is suitable for regulators. And our intention is, within this financial year, if we can identify that that has value to regulators, offering that as widely as we can with what funding we have available to give people e-learning licenses. So that's something I'm really hopeful we'll be able to offer later this year, assuming actually the regulators that we do put through it see the value of it for a regulator's role. And this is what we keep coming back to within the local delivery team, how we can focus our support on what can regulators do. We're just one small part of a much larger picture, but actually I think we're a very important part because of the business engagement that we have. If you're interested in this training, it's something we'll either put out through the strategic regional networks, the primary authority regional groups, or the local delivery bulletin. So that's something I'm quite hopeful for. I've now got a short presentation from Sam Lux, who's a policy advisor on net zero engagement within OPSS. She's been working on the SME Climate Hub, which is a tool for small and medium enterprises. It's been promoted through the growth hubs and actually gives a nice flavour of what she's been delivering with that. I'm hopeful the video will work if I click on it, but please shout out if you can't hear it or if there's any problems with it at all, but hopefully it will work. Now, hopefully that was interesting. It is something that is specifically around SME support, and as Sam said there's a number of tools available, so it's an ideal first point to signpost businesses to, and it's a lot of free resources and a lot of support there, and the growth hubs are very much promoting this through their networks and looking to get those sign-ups. And whilst that nice graph showed that we were a long way ahead at the start of COP26, obviously that's because we put a big push in before COP26, so we could say where we are before we started. So, other resources, Guardians of Grub. Hopefully many of you will be aware of WRAP as an organisation. They have a scheme called Guardians of Grub, which is focused around tackling food waste at a retail and hospitality level. They offer free resources and training via their website, and I'll come on to it a little bit later, but Mike Berry from Mendip District Council, he's one of the authorities that we're funding, and he's doing a project around wasted food in the hospitality sector. And what he said is one of the best elements of that was the upskilling of officers through the free WRAP training. And he described it as, it's a big, easy win because it enables primarily environmental health officers, when they're going into food businesses, to actually have those educated conversations with a business, offer suggestions, and have that awareness of the tools that are out there to signpost people to. It is free for businesses to sign up. It gives them a commitment, it gives them tools and resources, and as I'm sure you can all appreciate, wasted food within a business sector is wasted money. And so you're helping the business reduce wasted money going out the door, but also having to deal with that waste once it's generated in an effective way, whether that's through sending it to biodigestion or actually having to pay landfill tax on it. Another initiative that BEIS are supporting through their Retail Sector Council is called Green Street. And this is a bottom-up programme where they're trying to engage SMEs and find out actually what works for them, giving them that level of support to try different things and share their learning. So they're just starting a pilot in Bradford City, where Bradford City Council have given them, I think it's £150,000 worth of funding, and that focuses on 30 businesses, both retail and hospitality, and the intention is that it's by and for retailers based on their real experiences. It is something that is just a pilot, but they're very keen for people to actually get involved if there is that desire locally. I'm just going to put in the chat the contact details for Victoria, who is the person leading this, and they're very keen to explore extending this across the country. But just to go through some examples of it, the key principles for Green Street as an initiative is that it uses experience and knowledge from large retailers to accelerate the learning of small retailers. I think we can all appreciate the larger the retailers, they have lots of departments and tools to be able to do a lot of the trials to reduce waste, become cleaner, greener, and actually cascading that down to smaller businesses can be really beneficial. They're also looking to curate jargon-free tools to actually enable people to understand the terms, and setting up R&D action plans to test actions to see if they actually work in a real world setting, and just trying to create a strong brand and use the funding to rejuvenate high streets and make them cleaner, greener places to be. And the principles that they're following as part of the Green Street programme is about saving energy, so allowing people to switch to renewables, minimising packaging, and looking to reuse, recycle. So they're looking at regulator connections, for example, if they're going to be changing packaging and minimising packaging, how does that impact on food safety? Engaging with the environmental health is something we're trying to support, but not all packaging is going to be food safe. Some packaging may impact on the shelf life of products, so it's ensuring, whilst trying to be more eco-friendly, it doesn't cause further problems down the line. Another example would be where a business is trying to save energy by switching off chillers overnight. How are they then maintaining temperature integrity of the product within those chillers? Are they doing some sort of temperature monitoring daily? Do they have alarm systems? But having that regulator input so they can actually learn those lessons early on and get the support they need. One of the other things that they're looking at as part of the scheme, as well as promoting Guardians of Grub, is also looking at how communities and these street areas can work together. So a refill water scheme where all the businesses will offer free refills to water bottles. Reusable coffee cups. So rather than disposable coffee cups, all of the businesses signed up to the Green Street programme will actually accept reusable coffee cups. You can use them in any of the venues. But again, the regulator input there about making sure the cleaning is appropriate, the cups are appropriate, and everything is compliant from the start, so they don't cause themselves further problems going on. As I say, the pilot in Bradford is just starting, so this is a range of some of the businesses that have signed up to be part of that, and that just gives you a flavour of some small, some large. Geek Street is one of my favourite names there. I'm sure that's a shop that I would fit into. But as well as some of these SME businesses, they've had the theatre in Bradford sign up, the University of Bradford, and even Bradford City Football Club. They're all keen to actually build on this programme, work together, share their learning, and just improve Bradford as an environment. And an example of how Green Street intends to do that is actually sharing people's real world experiences. So this is Ursula, who is one of the Green Street pioneers in Bradford. She runs a sort of plant/coffee shop. And so it's, what is she trialing? What is she doing? Is she able to mentor people, learning from her experiences of what works, but equally what doesn't work, what doesn't give the returns on investment that businesses need to understand to be able to take things forward. So the final sort of points, regulations with green impacts. A lot of the current laws that I'm sure you're very familiar with will have significant inputs into green issues. Again, just highlighting the inner nerd within me. There's a gavel up there in the top right corner, but it's not for auctioneers. So the current legislation that we enforce around environmental pollution, air and water quality, waste, recycling, all of those elements, fly tipping there, product claims about things being biodegradable, home compostable, eco-friendly, sustainably sourced. All of those are claims that are designed to influence consumer behaviour, but in a lot of cases there isn't a clear legislative framework around those, so it falls back to things like false and misleading claims and having the resources at a local authority regulator to test those claims. Very easy to claim something is sustainably sourced or is made from recycled materials or even home compostable, but actually who's checking those? There isn't a national regulator for those sort of things, and we fully appreciate the stretched resources that local authorities have. And finally, weights and measures. That picture in the bottom left corner is a refill station. These are becoming increasingly popular in shops where you can bring your own Tupperware in, refill containers with cereal, for example. But how is that controlled in terms of weights and measures? If it's being sold by weight, how is that managed? If it's something that people can access themselves, like a pick and mix counter, again, how is food safety managed within that to avoid, for example, cross-contamination or just other general issues, because this is something new that's happening and the legislation wasn't written with this in mind. So how does it apply to these individual circumstances. Greenwashing, this is a term that is where you make something appear greener than it is. It was highlighted as an issue in the Winter Journal of Trading Standards. So obviously they're recognising it as a concern. They identify that it can affect not only the planet but consumers, businesses, either positively or negatively in terms of unfair competition, but also allowing businesses to make the claims that are legitimate to gain that competitive advantage if indeed they are being green, making themselves a more sustainable organisation. Minimum energy efficiency standards is something that could be seen as the way that regulation will be used to ratchet up environmental standards, for example. This is something, as you can see from the timeline, that started in April 2018, where domestic residential property could only be rented if it had an energy efficiency rating of E or above. In April 2022, that increased again to all domestic residential property, not just new lettings. And the intention there in April 2023 is those minimum standards will apply to all non-domestic, so commercial properties, not just new lettings. So those businesses on the high street that haven't got proper insulation, have got old boilers, for example, they will not have an energy efficiency E or above. So the renting of those will be illegal under the minimum energy efficiency standards rules. This is part of the reason for that understanding and education element. So when regulators are engaging with businesses, they may not be from a licensing background or one of the regulators that enforces this, but visiting a business and recognising actually the efficiency of the building might present a problem in the future. Now is the time to start thinking about improvements. There are grants available for insulation, upgrading to double glazing, for example, replacement boilers, all of these different elements. So understanding what is coming down the road and that horizon scanning puts regulators in a really strong position to have those upfront conversations. And finally, the Guardians of Grub element that I mentioned earlier. This is from Mike Berry from Mendip District Council. He's an environmental health officer, and we're giving him some funding on looking at wasted food in the hospitality sector. So, as I mentioned, he arranged for the Guardians of Grub to do free training to their food officers that upskilled them and enabled to have those conversations as part of their planned interventions. So it was something that they started learning really early on, that officers are having these engagements and businesses want to engage. They want to have those conversations. They want to understand what is available, but it for them can be a very confusing picture. They've sent so far over 500 emails, they've done 60 visits and have taken lots of learning from that. A food to go app. So this is a kind of free cycle for food. So where businesses have wasted food, is perfectly usable, but they know they're not going to use it. They can have an app that offers this food out to other businesses for collection. Similarly, a community larder. So rather than food going to waste, if it's not going to be used by the business, if it's getting close to its best before date and the business doesn't want to stock it anymore, they can donate it to a community larder so the community can benefit from that food rather than it going to waste. The Guardians of Grub sign-ups, the officers that did the training are obviously in a position to promote Guardians of Grub, the resources available. Unfortunately, one of the issues that they've identified is the challenge in finding out how many of those businesses they speak to actually do sign up to Guardians of Grub. Because of the GDPR protection rules, they're not able to share the full details. So whilst they might have some figures generally, actually that connection is a bit more difficult, and something with hindsight they should have considered earlier and maybe help the businesses sign up. But all this learning is part of the project, and by the end of this financial year, we're hoping to get a more comprehensive write-up from Mike, but because of the delays that, you know, in the last 6 months, I think everyone can understand, the project's likely to continue for a few months more. So the change that businesses have gone through from where they started to where they finish actually is better measurable. And just some examples of the learning. This was something when I spoke to Mike, it's almost guess the pictures. So the first one, top left, they're pizza crusts. This was something that was identified. All pizza restaurants seem to find their largest waste is pizza crusts. As people eat the pizza, don't eat the crust. And obviously it's very difficult to use that. And so some of the businesses and some of the promotion and sharing experience they're doing to other businesses is actually providing dips with the pizza. So when you finish the pizza, you can dip your crust in a salsa or a garlic mayo or something like that, and help reduce that waste with people consuming those pizza crusts. The brown lumps are actually from a coffee machine. When people make that barista coffee, there is a lot of coffee waste around. There's various options for that coffee waste, either compressing them into coffee logs for burning on fuel stoves. Mushroom growers apparently really like coffee grounds for growing mushrooms, and also they're apparently very good for gardeners, either for acidic liking plants. Coffee grounds are a good fertilizer, but they're also very good at repelling slugs. One of the learning elements through what Mike's doing, and referring back to the Green Street project, one retailer might not create enough waste to enable them to use different outlets for that, because they're just not producing enough. But if you have a Green Street model, for example, with 2 or 3 people that are producing waste coffee grounds, actually then that becomes something where they can pull together and access a different waste stream or a more economical disposal channel. One of the areas that Mike's found that are really keen to engage are schools and residential care homes. And the pieces of learning that he's picking up from visiting them and sharing with others is, in order to reduce food waste in a residential home, giving the residents soup in cups, because they find that easier to consume than a bowl and a spoon. It's a really simple piece of learning, but it reduces the waste and obviously has the benefit of improving the health of the residents. Similarly, he's identified one residential care home that is starting to trial the use of blue plates to reduce food waste, because there have been some studies that when you give somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia food on a blue plate, they eat more. So it's a simple way to improve the health of residents, to reduce that food waste, and that's something he's encouraging some of the businesses he engages with to trial, because it's a simple change and it has potentially very large benefits for the residents and the businesses themselves. One of the other learning points was giving free bread in sort of hospitality restaurant settings. There's a lot of waste with free bread because it's given away, people don't necessarily want it, it's either half consumed or not consumed, and all of that goes to waste. And so actually what they're trialling is, if you offer bread for a small charge, then you're able to offer a higher quality bread and reduce their waste at the same time. So it's still available for those that want it. It is a nominal charge, but it's a small charge to just make people think about, do they want bread, rather than giving it to them regardless, and then it goes to waste. And finally, the piled up plate is something I'm sure some of us can recognise. It's portion control. Actually, a lot of businesses feel that if they give smaller portions, customers will be unhappy. But actually, a learning point from the Guardians of Grub training that they've done is, if you reduce the plate size slightly, you can serve that same portion. It still seems like a good sized portion. Customer satisfaction's maintained, and it's reducing waste. So finally, it's please keep thinking. So can you build green threads into your work plans? It's something that is not going to go away. This is on the agenda for the long term. So it's starting to build in those elements to your work plans. what training do officers need? We're looking at, as I said, the Carbon Literacy Trust training. I've mentioned the Guardians of Grub training. We're also hoping to get produced a training video for regulators around heat pumps, because we know this is an issue that, again, is going to grow. Are there local green networks that you can tap into via the Growth Hub, either to share the learning with businesses, link in with them, offer them business advice and support, or just to be able to push your messages out in terms of regulation and compliance? And I think the sort of message to take away is, how can we embed the green thinking, the climate always in mind, to the work of regulators? Because, as we said at the start, regulators do have a lot of boots on the ground. They have a lot of business engagement and a lot of influence. And in order to make the changes that we need to as a country and as a planet, regulators need to have that buy-in and be able to support businesses to make the changes that they need. Thank you very much for listening to me. As I'm sure some of you have heard me speak before, I have done quite a bit of engagement around net zero. It's something that I can see a real role for regulators in, and at the local delivery team, we're keen to support that work as much as we can, but obviously our focus is quite narrow because it's regulators, and so we're always looking at opportunities where we can help you engage with net zero teams within BEIS and the wider offering that we're supporting. We're about to come to the end of my slightly extended slot. Most of the sessions this week are sort of half an hour, but because I was in charge of this, I gave myself 45 minutes. But if anyone has any questions or comments, please raise your hand, put it in the chat. I will share the rest of the sessions that we've got today. We have at 2 o'clock licensing. So the licensing manager from Worcestershire Regulatory Services will be talking about the role of licensing within local authorities. And then at 3 o'clock, we've got Dave Brookfield from West Midlands Fire Service talking about the role of fire safety officers. So if you have any availability, I certainly recommend coming along to those. But as I mentioned, the sessions are all recorded. They will be going up on our YouTube channel probably next week, which is why we have a core committed group of people that are attending live and in person. So thank you very much, all of you, for attending today, and hopefully I'll see some of you in the later sessions. I'm just going to stop the recording there.